In this week's episode, we got a dead e-locker actuator, so I'm gonna try to fix it and bring you guys along with me. This is an actuator I got from a junkyard a couple of years ago. I didn't do anything before I slapped it in, but throw on a coat of paint, and it's been good. It's worked for a couple of years, but now it's completely dead. You plug it in, you try to activate it, it does a tiny little click, but that's it. So I'm gonna start by blowing this thing apart and see what we can find. I'm gonna start off by getting at these 1, 2, 3 screws on this cap, if I can even get them. They look like they're probably gonna strip really easily. Can't seem to get a good grip on any of these. These screws on top are doing nothing but wanting to strip. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my grinder and grind these into slots instead, so I can use a flathead, which should allow me to get a little bit more grip on them. Oh, there we go. Oh no, I ground down too far and didn't leave enough material and now busted that head. This one might need to be drilled. Now I should be able to just pry underneath this and pop this cap, whoop, straight off. Okay. Well, one issue is immediately present. 2 out of 4 of these magnets are not attached in here anymore. We'll need to re-glue those to the sides, and now we can look even deeper. The electronics in the top bit here look fine. There's not an awful lot of corrosion in here. So let's move to taking the bottom plate off. It looks like if we take this clip off, this gear will come straight out, and then we can work on getting those 1, 2 bolts off the back, and this whole back plate should just right off. Now hopefully I can just use a screwdriver. Oh, there it is. And off. Careful, this is probably a very easy part to lose. Okay, and 2 8mm by the looks of it. Actually, remember to take that guy off first. Now I think this guy just separates. Yep, just sneak my screwdriver in there. Oh, all sorts of corrosion and nasties in there, eh? Here's the other side. Well, what grease was in here isn't. It's been replaced with rust. But I think we can rebuild it. This guy should, yep, just pull right out of there. I think I want to remove all of the electronics from this and give it a thorough cleaning, so we got to figure out how to knock this plug out the back. If I unbolt this guy here, I should be able to get the wiring out of the way, and maybe I can use a punch and knock it out. Man. Ugh. Nasty. I really hope we get lucky with these screws in here. That's the not rusted one coming out. Please don't strip. Oh, it's turning. These actually felt loose, strangely enough. Does this have... Okay. Now, can I punch this cap out? Does it go in? I'm not going to avoid cutting these wires because I got to fish it through the housing regardless to get it out. Clearly, it's been spliced with before, so let's just get these out of the way. And maybe I could punch that into the housing now. Or I'll just completely ruin that. Alright, the wiring is all loose inside here, and to feed it all through I need to take this doohickey out. So it looks like 2 more little screws. Oh no. Looks like when I was hammering it I lost a spring. See this spring here? There's supposed to be another one right here. Because these guys actually push out on these little blocky things when you reassemble it. That might be a pain to find, but also it looks like a ballpoint pen spring might work as a replacement. That guy's off. Now does this whole thing come off? 1 more screw hiding at the top. Now that we got the electronics gutted out of this housing, we can give it a thorough cleaning. Starting with taking this gasket off, and then grabbing my drill with a wire brush and pretty much go to town on this thing. All right, so we got everything all blown apart and cleaned up pretty good. I don't see any reason why this e-locker is not rebuildable. But before we go any further, I'm going to extract this bolt that we broke on the top when removing this little cap. And luckily, I did get it to spin a little bit before it broke, so we have a little ledge here to try to extract it with. So I'm gonna use the grinder again, slot it, and go back to the flathead screwdriver. That didn't work, so I'm going to grind this flat, punch it, drill it, and call it a day. Well, the drill bit totally walked, so that means it's only gonna get 2 bolts. And of course it's on the one with this big old lump underneath it, because any other one I could have drilled out fully and just upsized it or put a nut on the back, but because it's this one, is what it is. Also, there's a bearing in here. I would replace it, but it still turns just fine, so we're gonna leave that guy where it is. So now that I've boogered up this top hole and I don't know how to fix it, we're gonna ignore it and move on to reassembly. I went down to the auto parts store, got a couple of new O-rings for it, got some white lithium grease, and I got some RTV, totaling $30 Canadian. So if this works, that sure beats the heck out of the $500 plus it would cost to just replace this actuator. A step that I did that you probably won't have to do is replace these wires. I cut them up here and soldered in a couple new ones. On mine, these 2 wires for this bit coming into the back of the actuator were toast. All the shielding off them was destroyed and it had a potential to short. So in theory, we should be able to just fish these wires through there and then push them down into the middle. Just like that. Pull it through, push it down, pull it through, and then screw this guy back down. So what I'm using to stop these guys from sliding out from the spring is these little like twisty cable tie deals. So now that these are pushed back, I should be able to slide that guy in its home. Yep, just like that. I think that's a win. Now for the next phase of reassembly is to get these magnets that are detached and re-glue them to the inside of this cap. And the way we're going to do that is just with some good old JB Weld. I've already mixed it up here, so I'll pull these out one by one, apply some JB Weld, and try to put them back in their exact place. Just trying to spread it nice and evenly along the back, and then down and into your home. And there we go. All 4 magnets are back in their home, which means I can't put anything back together till tomorrow. So we'll see you then. The JB Weld is all nice and dry, so now we're on to reassembly. And before I put everything back together, we're going to use a bit of white lithium grease. I'm going to grease the bushing in the very end of this guy that the shaft rides on. And I'm also going to grease the little worm gear shaft in here. Technically, this isn't the right grease. Toyota sells some grease to do this, but it is insanely expensive. White lithium grease is essentially the same thing. It is used to weatherproof electronics, so in theory it shouldn't really mess with anything in here. And now that it's all greased, I'm going to set the O-ring on top and then put the cap back in its home. So on this cap, there's a couple of dimples right there and right there. And those dimples are just to make sure that you don't put the cap on in the wrong orientation. So if we suck this guy down, just like that, and then the bolts will go back in. I made a decision. I decided I'm gonna fix that third hole. I think this whole little chunk on the bottom of this housing isn't necessary. Nothing really goes through it. So I think I can just cut it out and then drill the hole from the bottom. That's the plan anyway. So I gotta take the electronics back out of this, unfortunately, but it'll be worth it. Here's the plan. Is it a bad idea? I'm about to find out. Hey, that's perfect. Now I can drill straight up from the bottom. The actuator housing is notched and drilled, so now we can put a bolt down on this corner and actually mount the cap properly. So with that done, we are back onto reassembly again, but this time I feel better about it. Give it some brand new bolts. Hopefully I can, there we go. And a nut on the bottom. Perfect. Now I think we can test it. So I've got this over here at my battery. I got one side on the positive, the other on the negative, and if I touch it, Hey! And now if we reverse that and put the red over here and green over here, it spins backwards. Perfect! That means that we're on the right track for rebuilding this actuator. If I put the rest of it together, should be good. That's awesome. So we'll start by fishing those wires down here and bolt that guy back in its home. Now I'm going to add a bunch of grease to this big gear here. And then lastly, a little bit around the bushing on the bottom. We'll give this guy a brand new O-ring, and this guy will now drop into its home. Bolt it back down, and then the last step, put the clip back on. And that is how you rebuild an e-locker. Let's go throw it on the battery and give it one more test. One side to negative, the other side to positive. Hey! And it works! Anyways, guys, that's about all we got time for in this week's episode of Dirt Garage. I'm sorry this was probably pretty short because I just threw this together really quick a couple days before we left to King of the Hammers so that we had a video out for the week while I'm gone. Anyways, guys, if you do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button and hey, consider subscribing. We are this close to 50,000. Anyways, we'll see you next week. Peace.